Plugged In, I'm Greta Van Susteren. This week, a look at some of the hottest new gadgets at this year's Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, CES for short. And it has become the premier global event for tech buffs. Many companies spend a whole lot of money to showcase their newest and coolest and must-have technology. And there seems to be no shortage in the number of consumers and so-called tech geeks. They're all willing to pay good money to be the first to try the gadgets out. This year, the event drew more than 180,000 people to Las Vegas, all of them hoping to catch a glimpse of the next best thing. But is the latest and the newest always the greatest? And is our love for new technology making our lives better or just more complicated? And what about your privacy? We'll talk to reporters who have covered CES, and we will also speak to a couple security and tech-savvy experts who will tell you what you need to know about all this new technology. And we will also on Facebook at Voice of America and want your comments and questions. And it's become a huge global event, attracting more than 4,000 exhibitors from more than 150 countries, all of them ready to show off the newest technology aimed at making your life and your home more connected than ever. This year, more than 180,000 people came to see what all the intrigue is about. So we put together a virtual look at what they saw. Here are some of the sights and sounds from this year's Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas.
Technology has really kind of hit a stumbling block between consumer concerns about privacy and just the fact that the innovation out there isn't what it used to be. There are definitely a lot of concerns, a lot of drags on this CES.
So here at the show, I expect to see a lot of technology that really talks about what 5G means, hardware that kind of supports this new technology, and maybe, finally, IoT might become a thing.
Open it! Open it! Open it!
You gotta go to the sensor 30!
Are trying to create like a species, not like a robot that is remote controlled, but it will move autonomously based on its own desires and emotions.
Here is what I have on file for you. Does everything look right with your order?
So the TV, when it's off, rolls into the box that it comes into. It's not obstructing any views or any windows. When you're ready to watch TV, it opens up fully to watch your programming, or we have what's called the line view, which gives you a partial opening so you can listen to music, look at photographs, check the time and the weather. It really works with your lifestyle.
It can be tablet size and fold into a cell phone size.
Joining us via Skype, VOA Silicon Valley Bureau Chief Michelle Quinn. Now, she's been a regular attendee of this dazzling Consumer Electronics Show. Michelle, thanks for joining us, and tell me, how does this year differ from any of the other years?
Well, this year was just so many ideas. I mean, I guess what I thought was amazing was you had the drones, you had the sensors, you had artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and there's so many people and companies that are trying to figure out their own way of solving a problem using the technology. And so where there really wasn't like one like big technology that everybody's talking about, there was just so much creativity and in human ingenuity really that I saw this year, and particularly about sensors. People are solving, maybe there may be 20 sensor companies dealing with sleep, pillows that heat up at night and cool down or heat you up to wake you up. And there might be sensors in your refrigerator that will tell you when you're out of 2% milk. So I think that what we're seeing is that it's really kind of the era of sensors and kind of what they can do for us.
All right, which exhibit did you spend the most time at and why?
Well, we went to the John Deere exhibit. Now, John Deere is a farming equipment manufacturer, kind of an American icon, and they brought a huge tractor to show CES, to show the tech community, hey, we've been doing self-driving tractors for a while. We know how to make a tractor run without anybody using the steering wheel. But when we went to their booth, that's where we saw where John Deere is, again, using sensors and cameras, autonomous technology to figure out kind of what is a plant and what is a weed. And that will help kind of reduce spreading herbicide by 40%. So that's where we could see, it was the first time John Deere had gone to CES. And then we could see, like, here's a problem they're trying to solve with the technology that everybody's sort of buzzing about, but they took their own unique take on it. So I think I spent the most time there, but I also, it was pretty hard to miss the ping pong playing robot, and I got to see a hockey player, an NFL hockey player, take on the robot and did pretty well.
You talk about the fun things like the ping pong. I mean, that's the ones that gets a lot of attention. But the John Deere actually might have a huge impact around the world. I mean, even think of some of the areas in some of the agriculture areas, for instance, in Africa. I mean, eventually this technology can affect so many places around the world.
Well, I think that's a good point, because if the sensors and the cameras and all that technology can mean that, there's less herbicide, specific water applied, resources and are really the issue for our planet, and particularly for continents like Africa. So it could make a huge difference if they can get it to market and also, of course, make it affordable for farmers around the world.
I always think this is a big tease, though, because a lot of the products I hear about aren't for sale yet. And so you go there and you think, wow, I really want this. But, then when I ask someone about this, they say, well, that'll be available in September. And I think, well, that's a little late for me.
I think that's true about the John Deere technology. It's 3 years out. So they were showing something that's going to be out soon, but 3 years. So yeah, that's true. That is a little bit of the cat and mouse thing all the time with the tech industry. But then suddenly, things sneak up on you. You're like, okay, I'm so used to the idea of a smartphone, and then suddenly it becomes the center of your life. And I think that's the weird thing about consumer technology, is that you kind of percolate and saturate yourself in it for a while, and then suddenly it's very, very important in your life, and you didn't even realize that it was the new thing, and suddenly you're all about it now.
And of course, phones are used all over the world, these smartphones. But I liked what I heard. There's one that you can fold. I didn't really like that because I want to stick one in my pocket. So I'm looking forward to like a folding smartphone.
Well, I mean, the phone question is a great question. I think a lot of people, I got my phone, and it hasn't really changed a whole lot since 2007 when the iPhone came out. It's kind of the same shape and size, and I mean, yes, there's it goes faster, and it's got this great camera. So what's the phone industry going to do? And what Samsung is not quite yet, but it's going to have a foldable phone, and that is, that might be really fun to have something that has the form factor changes. LG, which is a South Korean company, had a TV that rolled up. Kind of like it would kind of ascend and then descend, but it would roll up. So you would just basically, it would be a piece of your furniture, and you push a button and it comes up. So yeah, we're seeing a little bit of playing with the form factors, but in general, people are bored with this. I think what we really want to look for next is something called 5G, and 5G is going to be the new network that's going to allow us to do things a lot faster.
And speed, of course, we're all dying for the speed because it seems apparently we can't get enough of this, especially in downloads. Anyway, Michelle, thank you very much, and I'm jealous. I would have liked to have gone. Thank you for joining us.
Next year.
Next year. All right, as you can imagine, there was probably not a single square meter of the CES floor show that was not connected somehow to the internet. But if this year's event gives us a glimpse of what the smart homes of the future will look like, it also exposes some of the potential risks consumers could face in our interconnected world. Here's more from plugged-in producer Mil Arcega.
Shuffling songs by Adele.
From voice-enabled smart speakers that play your favorite tunes, to doorbells that tell you who's at the door, to devices that adjust your thermostats or shut your blinds when it's time to sleep. The home of the future is already here.
You've been sitting all day. You are not on your track towards completing your goal. You should go for a walk.
Equipped with artificial intelligence, personal robots can even remind you when it's time to exercise or decide when an elderly client just needs to talk. And don't forget the kitchen, where ingredient recognition technology can now tell you if you forgot to buy your vegetables.
It actually allows you to scan the contents of your refrigerator using a camera embedded within the Yumly app.
But whether they keep us entertained or well-fed, or just make sure we get to our appointment on time while we're riding a driverless car, the one thing these new devices share in common is that all of them are connected to the internet, each one relaying real-time information from your home to a central database using any number of onboard sensors and an almost ubiquitous supply of miniature cameras.
Cameras are everywhere today, and their number increases regularly every single day. It is literally a public space. Think about it, if you're sharing a vehicle, it is more of a public space, similar to when you walk into a bank or a movie theater or even this space in here.
Which means that almost everything we do, everything we ask for, is rarely private. The question many security experts want to know is how much of what we do at home is really private or really secure? And in the age of internet-connected devices, who's your smart home really talking to?
How much of our private lives are you surrendering when you choose to use technology? Gary Davis works for the cybersecurity company McAfee. He is its Chief Consumer Security Evangelist and is an expert on privacy and the security of what is called the Internet of Things. Nice to see you, Gary.
Thanks for having me, Greta.
All right, Gary, what's the thing that scares you most about security with all these new gadgets and technology?
Well, you know, as Michelle said, if it can be imagined, it can be connected. And a lot of these companies, what they're really solving for today is time to market and convenience. In other words, what's the technology you want to build, and how can I get that in the hands of consumers as soon as possible? And they're really foregoing a lot of meaningful security controls. And then when it goes into the consumer's house, of course, the consumer, all they want to do is get the service, right? They want that center that will tell them that their milk is low or something like that. So you have this space now where what we call the attack surface is growing dramatically. So the bad guys have many more things that they can target and try to take advantage of.
Well, it seems to me there are a couple of things to consider. One is, I mean, at least here in the United States, we have, privacy. The police can't just come barging into your home and just grab anything. And, this does sort of give an ability for things in your home to somehow be disseminated to somebody. So, I mean, it's the whole security of your information. But these companies also have access to information. Can they just sell it? I mean, if you're using the amount of power you may be using in your house or what you're requesting of one of these, like of Siri, can they sell that information?
Well, theoretically, the way they should do it is it should be informed consent. In other words, if a consumer says, I'm okay with you selling some of my usage information, provided you give me some sort of discount or some sort of value for that information, then again, let the consumer make that decision. But it's I think that's a gray area as to whether or not it's legal or not. It's really about consumer consent. If the consumer says, I'm okay giving up this information, provided I get perhaps a better service or some sort of discounted service, then it's really in the hands of the consumer, and that makes it more approachable.
Well, two things. One is if you don't give your consent, you probably still can't get the service, whatever the service is that you want, number one. Number two is that every time I see those forms where you consent and I read them, they are so long, they are so complicated, the print is so small, is that you don't even know what you're consenting to. And I dare say that a lot of people don't even bother to read them. I confess I may be one of them and just check the mark and move on.
That's true, although I would argue that there are some companies that are making great progress here, where they're taking what otherwise has been a very legally complex document, and at least when it comes to this type of information, how we're going to use your private information or how we're going to secure this device is being put in a more plain English point of view. So they're trying to get better at being more transparent and making sure that in a very layman's way, you understand exactly what they're collecting and why. So, but again, the essence of what you're saying is spot on. Right now, it's buried in the middle of what's called the EULA, and rarely do people actually read that and consider what's going on. But there is a movement where companies are trying to get better and making that information more easily understandable by the typical consumer.
All right, the Amazon Alexa, for instance, or the Apple Siri, those are devices, the HomePod that you can have at home. Are they always listening to you? I mean, do you run the risk that it turns on automatically, or say some keyword, something that sounds like Alexa or sounds like Siri, so that gathers information that you didn't even intend to send anyplace?
Sure. I mean, it's always listening, so don't be confused that it's not always listening, but it is. And in fact, I remember about a month ago, I have, as you can imagine, several of these devices in my home, and I was having a discussion with my girlfriend. And the next thing you know, Alexa is explaining to me about butterflies. Well, there's the butterfly stroke and the butterfly insect. And it's like, well, I never said Alexa, nor did I ask any questions about butterflies. So you're right, it's always listening.
Why would you want that then? Why would you want something like that?
For the convenience factor. Consumers want to make their life simpler. That's what it's all about. If I can save even a fraction of a second and using Alexa to set an alarm or do these other conveniences, a great feature is drop-in. Hey, listen, I want to talk to somebody in a different room in my house. I don't want to walk from my bedroom to that other room. Let me just do a drop-in and have a conversation that way. They love the convenience.
All right, well, let me take another extreme. Suppose you said something to your girlfriend that's totally innocent, and Alexa picks up the information, and then somehow someone grabs that information, whether it's whoever is on the receiving end of this, and it's misinterpreted, or even Alexa misinterprets it, and now you have a potential problem.
Yeah. Again, you're talking about fringe cases. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. In fact, that exact thing happened a couple months ago, where somehow in the middle of a conversation, Alexa not only picked up the conversation but sent that information in an email to one of their contacts in their database. So that happens. But it's really an outlier. I wouldn't want the people who are watching this to somehow think, oh my God, everything that I'm going to say to Alexa is going to get somehow transposed and sent to somebody that's not expected to go. We live in a time, in a situation where we just got to assume that the information is going to be somehow captured. And if we're uncomfortable with that, then perhaps one of the best options is to disconnect and just say, listen, I'm not going to take that risk and allow myself to be put out there.
Or what's also a risk, but less of a risk, might be just using your keyboard to type in the question you might have. Instead of saying, Siri, what's the weather? You could actually go to the keyboard and punch up a weather app, and it might be a little more secure, perhaps because or am I wrong?
You're exactly right, Retta. That's exactly what you can do. There are less invasive and less risky ways to get what you're looking for or to do things you want to do. It just depends on if you want the ultimate inconvenience, maybe you go down the Alexa path. If you want to take a more secure, less risky way to do that, then just key it into your keyboard so you see what's happening, and it can be, the proper perspective can be caught.
What does Alexa and the other sort of similar devices, what do they say they do with the communication you have with them? Do they say that they discard it, or what, are they storing it, or are they selling it? What do they tell the consumer?
Well, it's my understanding that most say that they will only capture the information when it's following the prompt. So they're not always sending information back to the services only when they hear the prompt, so they're listening for the prompt, and then whatever comes after the prompt is captured just enough to act on that command. And they're not storing any other information. Once the command has been executed, that information goes away. That's my understanding of how most of these companies process that information.
Gary, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The risks to privacy and security are not limited to just advanced countries. In fact, as some of our VOA correspondents report, cybercrime, just like the internet, casts a very large worldwide net.
According to a report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Russia, along with China and Iran, poses the biggest threat to computer security of the United States. But what about Russians themselves? Well, in this increasingly interconnected world, they are not immune to cyber attacks either. According to Russia's largest financial institution, Sberbank, only in 2018, the domestic economy lost over $14 billion to cybercrime. Russian banks and the financial sector overall are the main targets of computer thieves. That industry accounts for over half of all cybercrimes in Russia. However, most recent statistics show that despite the rise in number of cyber attacks on Russian banks in the last 2-3 years, their losses declined, and that's because of more sophisticated tools that banks are using today for cybersecurity. Russia's government is trying to regulate the field. In 2018, President Vladimir Putin announced creation of an automated information exchange system that is supposed to deal with cyber attacks. It is yet unclear, though, whether the Russian government intends to exchange that information with its Western partners that express growing concern over Moscow's malign cyber activity in international arena. Igor Tikhanenko, Sergei Sokolov, Voice of America, Washington, D.C.
Hi, this is Kelly Yu from VOA's Mandarin service. On discussions about cybersecurity, China is more often associated with computer hacking or theft of intellectual property. But less known is that China itself is vulnerable to cyber attacks as well. China is considered one of the world leaders in internet-based technologies. But, and that's important, China's ability to protect its own consumers is not keeping up. Just last month, over 200 million Chinese job seekers' resumes were leaked. They were victims of online data scraping. A 2015 government report showed us that cybercrimes cost China's economy over $12 billion per year. Actually, Chinese government has invested heavily to protect the government infrastructure, but the protection over business entities or consumer networks still lags. And now some businesses are taking the matters into their own hands. At CES, I was told by a China-based cloud computing provider that they're utilizing this blockchain technology to better protect their users' privacy, and that is something we're likely to see more from Chinese companies. So as you can see, Greta, technology can be a double-edged sword, and China, as many other countries in the world, is still struggling to get a better handle on new technologies.
So how is the giant and expanding growth of gadgets and internet-connected devices affecting our lives? Alexandra Deschamps-Sonsino wrote a book on it, Smarter Homes, How Technology Will Change Your Home Life, and she joins us from London via Skype. Nice to see you, and first tell me, what is a smart home?
Well, a smart home is your home, but with 100 years of attempts from a variety of technology companies to sell you stuff within it.
And you've written a book about it, so tell me, your book goes back how far?
I go back to Victorian times. I go back to the beginning of electrification. And so when we had to be convinced into buying plug points and buying light bulbs, to today, when the conversation you've had with Gary and with Michelle is absolutely on point, we are now being sold a variety of new devices and new capabilities with really the same arguments as 100 years ago: efficiency, convenience.
Well, now, all of this, though, the smart home, it seems to me, for the most part, is choice. You can make your home pretty much as smart as you want, assuming that you have the means. Do you have a smart home? Do you consider your home a smart home?
I have a few things that I've chosen and I've tested through the years, and I have things that I absolutely do not want in my home.
All right, that's
voice
the tease.
assistance, for example, is not one of them.
Why don't you want voice assistance? Because that's the Alexa, that's the Siri, the HomePod. Why don't you want voice assistance?
because of that lack of clarity around what happens to that information. These are possibly conversations I'm having at home, which I deem to be private. I already have to worry about my laptop listening to me and my phone listening to me and microphones being turned on and off remotely anyway through those devices. And also managing the amount of screen time I spend and the amount of time I spend connected. A large part of my private life in my home is spending time with myself, with my loved ones, with my friends, and it has to be unconnected, and that's the only way in which I can really make that happen.
Do you see the use of these devices, especially the voice accessible or anything, to help some areas of the world that may not be the more industrial areas, like developing countries? Are they of any particular value to them right now to make their lives better?
I think that these are very old technologies that were initially used for people with a level of disability, for example. So speech-to-text and text-to-speech technologies are quite old. Amazon and Google and Apple have managed to make them consumer-facing, but they were initially really useful for different kinds of communities and different kinds of needs. Whether to then extend that into saying that other countries can benefit more, I don't know. I think that people quite like to think of their homes as being spaces that they can control, and until we really have clarity around what happens to information, when information passes from the device to a cloud, and whether that's with a notification that says, okay, let me check that online for you, and then the search is made. We have no real way of knowing unless we unplug something, and I really hate plugging and unplugging things all day long.
I read, and tell me if I'm correct, I read that you've said that Amazon has been granted a patent to recommend cough sweets and soup to those who cough. Is that right?
Yes, and bear in mind, patents are one thing, applications are another, but there is a lot of information that those companies are unwilling to use and don't know how to use. Your smart television will not tell your elderly grandmother that she should probably go for a walk because she has been in front of the television for 12 hours. Your smart thermostat is probably not going to tell you to lower your heating because you're, again, an older person who gets quite cold in the evenings. So companies will do a degree of speculative research and futuristic thinking, but to really address the real problems that we have in our homes is another thing.
What it strikes me is that if I'm listening, if I want Siri to play some music and I sort of cough, all of a sudden Siri says I need cough medicine. Next thing I know is that I've got ads on cough medicine. That's what I worry about, things like that.
Absolutely. And the implication also perhaps to your healthcare provider that you've been ill, which is something you don't want to make, you want to make sure it doesn't happen. I think we have to make sure that people ask the right questions, are informed, really look on the packaging when they buy something, that they're buying something that really makes their lives easier rather than just shaves off microseconds off of something they would normally do. And so the real benefit of a connected product has to be very clear. And also the real benefit to the family, to the extended family, to other people who might be involved in that person's home. A lot of these devices are not very good at multi-user scenarios, and so it works for you, but it doesn't work for your spouse or your children. So really have a look at the packaging and really think twice.
And I'm going to take your advice because I agree with you. I'm going to take that advice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Before we go, an update on the fate of two Reuters reporters jailed in Myanmar for their reporting on the Rohingya crisis. While Lone and Jo So-u will remain in prison, their appeal has been rejected. A Myanmar court said the journalists did not provide enough evidence to demonstrate their innocence, and the pair of journalists were convicted in September of 2018 of breaking Myanmar's Official Secrets Act for their reporting on a 2017 massacre in a village in Rakhine State. The journalists say they were set up by police who gave them documents during a meeting at a restaurant shortly before other officers arrested them. One police officer agreed with the two journalists. He testified they were entrapped, but the court found the journalists guilty, sentencing them to 7 years in jail. Reuters editor-in-chief Stephen Adler said the rejected appeal is yet another injustice inflicted on these journalists. He says while Lone and Jo So-u remain behind bars for one reason: those in power sought to silence the truth. The journalists can further appeal their case to Myanmar's Supreme Court. That's all the time we have for today. Stay plugged in by liking us on Facebook at Voice America, and you can also like my Facebook page at facebook.com/Greta And do follow me on Twitter @Greta. Thank you for being plugged in.